Hey guys, welcome back. It's Patrick with Maverick Tactical. We're all about personal protection, tactical gear, and keeping you safe. Thanks for joining us today. We talked in our last podcast a little bit about Al Qaeda and the threat internally in our country. And I've got Doc back here with us, and we want to dive deeper a little bit into that. And so, Doc, welcome back.
Thank you.
We just want to talk about the threat. You know a lot about that. You've done the research, and there's some newer stuff that's come up, and wanted to have you back here to talk about that a little bit.
Sure, thanks. I think it's important to unpack this in kind of a couple different components of information, what the threat is, understanding the threat, and then kind of going forward, what can we do about it, right? So there is a known threat from Al Qaeda. It's being referred to as the 2025 U.S. homeland attack. I encourage people to kind of fact check me and also do their own information gathering and resourcing. My primary source where I get my information is from Ascari Media Group, and that's largely run by Sarah Adams. A lot of people might be familiar with Sarah. She's been on Sean Ryan's show on 3 different episodes, and that's where she kind of brought this to the surface and talked about it. Before I get into kind of the specifics about the threat and what the threat looks like and how it may present, what's interesting is a lot of agencies in the United States that should be concerned about this aren't concerned about it, or they're not talking about it. And yesterday at the Hickory Gun Show, that patrolman that we spoke with, when I asked him if he had heard of this, he heard about it from my same resources, but interdepartmental agency memos aren't coming down talking about the threat. And that should be really what's concerning about this, is that it's not getting the attention that it really should warrant. But anyway, what the threat is. So yeah, Al Qaeda has been planning to attack the United States on our homeland in a coordinated effort of multiple attacks. Within that kind of big sphere or scope of that, there's some important things that people should understand. It's not just Al Qaeda. It is also ISIS working with Al Qaeda. There's a common misunderstanding that they don't like each other, or that Al Qaeda doesn't work with ISIS, but that's not true. They are actually collaborating and working together. Kind of starting at the beginning of it, Al Qaeda is actually being run by Osama bin Laden's son right now, Hamza bin Laden. And that's part of why we believe that the US agencies aren't talking about it very much. If people recall, the CIA put out a few years ago that they killed Hamza bin Laden in a drone strike. And for them to acknowledge that not only is he still alive, but he's planning an active attack against the United States would mean that they got it wrong, right? CIA really doesn't like to say that they got anything wrong. So that's probably why there's some interdepartmental scuttle about why it's not being talked about. So anyway, there's some differences between Hamza bin Laden and Osama bin Laden. Hamza learned a lot about terrorism and how to run terrorism business from his dad, things to do and things not to do, where Osama bin Laden was big on taking credit for the attacks and the activities that they were doing, wanting people to understand the power and the threat that Al Qaeda represented. Hamza's not worried about that, which is why he's partnering with ISIS and other organizations to help them carry out some of their attacks.
That's what I was wondering. Why, do ISIS and Al Qaeda like each other? Are they 2 separate entities? Or are they just coming together because they just don't like us?
That's exactly it. They're 2 separate entities with similar ideologies, but a shared enemy, which is the United States and the Western world and the Western way of life. Interestingly enough, that question about, do they acknowledge each other and work together? Short answer is yes, but even when the open source information about the training that they went through in Afghanistan, they were going through separate training camps. They were not training side by side. And they've advanced their training. They've got urban warfare terrorist training camps now. They have suicide bomber training camps now. So they've got almost like military MOSs, right? They've got people that are trained for a specific component of the attack, and they go through a different camp to get trained specifically for their role in the attack. diving into that, talked about suicide bomber, urban warfare. The types of attacks that they're talking about are what's called swarming attacks, right? If we think about the Mumbai, India attacks back in 2008, they had only 10 attackers that hit coordinated 3 or 4 different attacks happening at the same time. So you had cells of 3 to 4 people committing multiple attacks coordinated at the same time. They communicate, right? And one of the other things about these cells as they're advancing is where former terrorist activities, they had a designated target. It was, you're going to blow up this bridge. Now they have autonomous decision making on the ground where they can shift on the fly in the middle of the battle or in the middle of their attack to get a greater target. If their primary target, say, is a bus station, but there's only 2 or 3 people at the bus station, but they passed a farmer's market on the way, they can let the other guys in their cell know, hey, I'm going to divert to a secondary target and blow up this farmer's market because we're going to get more literal bang for the buck there. So you've got a swarming attack, which is going to be multiple attacks happening at the same time by smaller cells. And I'll get into the numbers of that in a little bit. And then within those smaller cells, you're going to have what's called Fedayeen attacks, which is where you've got fighters that will stay and fight to the death. So you've got fighters that will stand and fight until either everyone in the area is dead or they're dead. And then you'll have suicide bombers, right, that will commit larger attacks. Within ISIS and Al Qaeda, what's important to understand is they have different goals, right? ISIS cares about body count, they care about killing as many people as possible. Al Qaeda cares about disrupting our economic power, disrupting the economic way of life in the Western world. So you've got 2 different supporting ideologies that are going in there. When we talk about numbers, what's known and what Sarah Adams and her group is talking about is they trained and have over 1,000 terrorists on US soil ready to attack already, right? So when I talked a moment ago about Mumbai, that was a 3-day attack by 10 attackers, right? Now imagine the United States, there's 1,000 of these attackers that can form cells, right? And just to make it easy math, right? Let's say we know DC is going to be Washington DC is going to be a target. Ideologically, they think the capital because that's the center of our government, right? And then New York City, right? So even if they designated, say, 100 attackers, which would be very big for them, right? But just to make easy math, if they had 100 attackers for Washington and 100 attackers for New York, that leaves 800 attackers. If they had a very large cell of 25, which is probably too big for the way they operate, that's still 36 other targets, right?
Yeah.
Now we know that I use very dumb big math, right? So it's likely that there's more than 36 targets in the United States. Even Sarah Adams and Ascari Media Group and her people, they self-admit they don't know what the targets are, and they don't know the exact dates of when they're going to happen. People think that it's going to be like 9/11 or an important date or anniversary. We get kind of arrogant as Americans, right? We think of important dates that are important to us, right? They're going to attack us on dates that are important to them, right? October 7th, what happened in Israel,
Right.
that was an important date because that was actually the first time a Westerner was put in power, I believe, in 1922 to control the Arab states in Palestine and around that area. That was important to them. Um, and 9/11 was an important date for them as well. It had nothing to do with codified information or some conspiracy theory. It was an important date of when they lost power to Westerners. And I might have gotten those 2 dates mixed up, but the important point is we look at anniversary dates that might be important to us. They're looking at anniversary dates that are important to them. So you have to know your enemy, which I think is what Sarah Adams, her books and her intelligence reports are called, is know thy enemy, right? You have to know them to understand them to try to counter them. Um, so yeah, there is a real credible threat against America that's supposed to happen sometime in 2025 that people should take serious.
How do you think the ISIS attack on Israel is in comparison? Is there any comparison?
100% there's a
Yeah.
comparison, and Sarah goes into great detail in talking about it. these swarming attacks, which is what October 7th was in Israel as well. That was a swarming attack, right? They had 1,500 fighters trained to execute that. That was they talk about waves of attacks. That was the first in a wave of attacks. Europe's on the target list too. And although I don't want that to happen to them, I'm more concerned about what happens in America, right? So that was actually the first, October 7th, Israel was the first attack in a wave of attacks that are getting set into motion. So there's a separate group of fighters that will hit Europe, right? And then there's a separate group of fighters that are going to hit America. So looking at what happened on October 7th in Israel, we need to understand that as well, because that we could likely see those same tactics.
Do you think that Europe will be hit first before us?
That's been a big question. That actually, I think it was on Sean Ryan's show the third time Sarah Adam was on. I think it was 146. That they talk about the sequence of events in the wave, and they're not 100% sure. I believe Europe will probably get hit before us, and that might be a telltale marker if we start seeing increase in terrorist activity in Europe that it's making its way. Yeah. So
So knowing, the credible threats and things, what do we need to be on the lookout for? What can we do?
So, really good question. First and foremost, like the fear mongering, that's not the point of this, right? It's not to make people scared, because if people listen to this and then they get scared and they start withdrawing from society, they start becoming recluses and not going out in public, then they've already won, right? Their whole purpose is to disrupt and destroy the American lifestyle. So let's not give them that up front.
And I think that's important too for us that, we try to give good information here on our channel. It's important for us to be aware of things.
Correct.
We don't want to scare anybody. We're not here to scare people.
Nope.
We're here to give information and credible information. So I do want to caveat that as well.
Yeah, and for listeners that may have heard me on Bullets to Beans before, my podcast that I had a while back, I've always challenged people to fact check me, right? And which is why I early on in our discussion here, I gave my sources, right? Go check them for yourself, right? Make sure that we're giving that information that's credible, that has some fact check to it, right? It's important to know that it's not just whispers in the dark and conspiracy theory being talked around. So,
but one of the most important things, and we've talked about this too, is knowing that when you're out and about, to have that presence of awareness, right? Your situational awareness.
Yes, 100%. So yeah, back to your question a second ago, what can people do about it? One, don't necessarily change your life, but maybe modify some things, right? Situational awareness, right? The understanding OODA loop, right? And if you don't know what an OODA loop is, look it up. It's important, and you should run an OODA loop constantly in your life. But knowing there's a grin analogy of threat assessment, right? Global threat, regional threat, intermediate threat, and your neighborhood threat, right? So global threat is looking at the whole world. What are the potential threats and what's happening in the world? Regional threat, what are the threats in the United States, right? What is happening in my country that could be a threat to me and my family and my way of life? And then intermediate, what's happening in my state, right? Or in my county, and then neighborhood threat, what's happening within 3 to 5 miles of me. You should know your grin analysis at all times, and you should constantly kind of run that threat analysis. So then the real question is, because everyone knows I talk about shopping and the fun things of buying toys, that's not what you should be doing first, right? That might become part of it, but I really focus on training, right? And the situational awareness, and like if you've always wanted to take a first responder class or a stop the bleed class, maybe now is a good time to do that. If you're an active lawful holder of a concealed carry license, but you don't carry consistently, maybe practice and get consistent with your concealed carry habits and fully take on that concealed carry lifestyle. If you've wanted to get a concealed carry license, but you just haven't done it yet, now might be a good time to do it. Throughout history, the only thing that's proven to stop a bad man with a gun is a good man with a gun, right? That touches back. I skipped something I want to go back to. The type of attack, I talked about the Fedayeen attack. I talked about, they'll fight to the death. What we saw when I talked about the Mumbai attack in 2008 is these were explosive initiated attacks followed with small arms fire, right? So they threw grenades, they got an immediate response, and then they started hitting people with AK-47 fire, right? So that's what we could expect, right? We could expect explosive initiated attacks with small arms fire, a combination thereof, and then suicide vest attacks, right? It targets of opportunity that disrupt and create body count. So as you're preparing, don't cancel your vacation, but think about your vacation, right? If you're traveling to a state that has reciprocity with your concealed carry permit, research and make sure that you can carry lawfully there, and make sure that you're carrying properly, and that you have the ability to defend and protect yourself and your family. Don't become a cop. Don't try to become the CIA. You're not becoming MI6, right? You're not trying to find the terrorists.
Right.
You're just trying to be prepared if and when it happens to respond to the event, so you can create distance, get yourself away from it, and don't feed into the damage and everything that they're looking for.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I didn't tell you, but Tina and I both signed up for the Stop the Bleed yesterday. We
Very
signed
good.
up for it. So
Very
the
good.
16th, I think, of January.
Again, nothing scares me more than people with really cool medical toys
Yeah.
that don't know how to use them.
That's exactly right. I've got, an IFAC that I honestly can't say that I know 100% how to use. So
Yeah.
we're gonna know that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the best thing people need to understand is it's credible, it's real. Validate my sources. Do some of your own research. You don't take this as the end all be all. Information is coming out almost daily. There was a video released by Sarah Adams and Ascari earlier today that they're now getting intelligence sources saying that the liquid bombs on airplanes, which is why TSA allows 3.4 ounces and
Right.
only so many, that they're looking at employing that again. There was that all came to be when intelligence sources figured out a few years ago, that they were looking at building liquid bombs on airplanes and blowing airplanes up mid-air, not using them necessarily as missiles like what we saw on 9/11, but blowing planes up in mid-air transatlantic, right? That's key because response and rescue, nobody's getting to you out there, right? Just like the Titanic, nobody could get out there, right? But that's going to create fear. Nobody's going to want to do international travel, right? So that is that I just got that information. I don't know when they released it. I usually get their feeds as it happens. I got that like 5 hours ago, right? So there's information that's coming out, and Sarah's group is really good about updating their social media feeds. They're not looking for anything other than an informed population, because their group, they care about the United States and the citizens, and they devoted their lives to fighting terrorists, and they continue to do that through their private channel and private medium now. So, gotcha.
So, the most important thing I think for us to think about is, like you said, be aware of our surroundings, know the things that you carry, whether it's a firearm or an IFAC kit, knowing those things that we carry in our backpacks, knowing how to use those things for a bug in or bug out type bag, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that on one of your other shows that you did for us. And knowing that, then we appreciate you being here today to bring us up to date on what's out there, what credible things are going on, things that we need to be aware of. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Here at Maverick Tactical, we're all about personal protection and keeping you safe. And sometimes, we do gear reviews, we do product reviews. This is a little different, but
Sometimes the best product we can give people is knowledge.
Right. So that's what we wanted to do today. We wanted to bring you something a little bit different, something that's on our mind that we're concerned about and we think you need to be aware of. And again, like I said, comment below and tell us what you're seeing. Maybe some informational sides or information that you might have, or websites that are credible that we might need to take a look at. Comment below and tell us what you're seeing. So thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate you checking out Maverick Tactical. Thanks for Doc being here.
Yep. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Yep.
And as always, stay frosty.
All right. Bye, guys.